Well, good afternoon, Australia and Asia. Today we're doing the case study on complex bid analysis for underground mining engineers. So in this specific case study, we're going through a lateral development example where we've been using some advanced analytics to identify errors and also opportunities in mining contractor bids. So today what I was going to do was go through the case study for the first bit, and then later on throughout the hour, we'll open the floor to some questions. So we've got some questions in there. We've got a Q&A box in there in your Zoom webinar. So as we're going through this, put questions into there. We've got Neil Shackle with me today, so he can help, and he's going to help me sort of facilitate some of those questions. So chuck them in there, and then we'll come back to those questions at the end. So as we're going through this, if there's anything, just jump in there. If we're having any other technical issues, or you want me to speak slower or something like that, just jump in the chat, put it into there. I'll pick that up. So we'll get going into this. So next slide. So running tenders. Tenders can be pretty problematic. They're really stressful. We want to make sure they're getting it right. You want to make sure you're getting it right. But it takes a lot of time. So what we've done and what we're looking at is, well, how do we make this process a whole lot easier and simpler and less errors, but also can find these opportunities within the actual analysis of these tenders. So today, my name is Simon Thompson. I'm the Managing Director and co-founder of Acquire Insights, and I've developed up some software that's I've been doing tenders for about 15 years or so, to make the actual commercial analysis a little bit easier and a little bit more robust. And we've also got Neil Shackle, who's joining us as well. And Neil actually used this software in this specific case study. So we'll get Neil can give you some more detailed answers into what it was like and some of the more intricate details through this. So before we get into the case study, I'm just going to give you a bit of a background as to, well, why we're talking to you about this. And give you a quick, there's a couple of slides here, give you a bit of an overview about who we are. So Acquire Insights, we're mining focused commercial analysis consultancy, and we're based in Brisbane. We work with some clients such as BHP, Newcrest, some other joint venture ones outside of Australia, be it Wafi Golpu, and also the BHP Mitsubishi Alliance up in Queensland and Australia. We've been operating for about 9 years, and we've got about a team of 5. So while we're based in Brisbane, we're currently working with a lot of organisations across Australia. One thing that really drives us is about making decisions based on data. So a lot of times you can sort of make some decisions in business about, well, this feels right, but we really want to look at it from a understanding the data from behind it, and really going, well, what's the best decision here, and how can we support that with information? And the reason why we do that is with myself, I've got an aerospace engineering background, and my business partner, Greer, she's got private equity and strategy consulting background. And we really take both these backgrounds and apply it to commercial analysis. And one of the things that we sort of focus on mainly at Acquire Insights is we work with mine owners who are really wishing to stabilize and sustainably improve their production when they've outsourced part or all of their operations to a contract miner. So, you've seen this graph here, fine production can go up and down over time. We're using a contract miner. But what mine owners often don't understand is that you can actually influence the production, even though it's at an arm's length. So you've outsourced it through a contract miner, and you can actually increase productivity overall and reduce that variability. And the way that we do it and the model that we use is really simple. It's three components of the model. where we've got a mining contractor, a contract model, and also the mining environment. And often what we find is mine owners go out and they select the contract or select the contracting model, and then they select the contract miner or mining contractor, and just look at those two pieces of the puzzle, put them together. But then, and using a perfect example, an example that came up just recently, was like, well, why can't we use the same contractor and contracting model on a, drift drivage versus a, greenfield operation versus a lateral development in a existing mining environment? And what we find in those two cases, the mining environment is significantly different, and it'll actually is the difference between whether an outsourced mining arrangement is going to be successful or it's not. Last part about us is the typical stuff that we do. So we help mine owners with their insourcing versus outsourcing decisions. We also help them with mining services, tender drafting, management, and analysis. We also help them with some contract management. We've got some specific software we've built for that as well, and also contract variation support, so negotiating some of these contracts. But the case study today is really about the mining services and the actual tender analysis. So without further ado, I'll get into that. So the case study. So the case study is a bit of background. A global mining company came to us. They're expanding one of their flagship copper gold mine operations, and they were outsourcing the lateral development components. So they were about to spend somewhere between about $500 million on this multiple year agreement that had multiple mining contractors bidding. So very, top renowned underground mining contracts, they're all bidding. Plus also they had an insourcing bid. So the actual team, they had the mine owner had a special team that actually did a bid, separate everything else, to see if there was something that they should look at as well. Really common at the moment. And the third part was the pricing bid sheet was really complex. So it was a Microsoft Excel workbook, had about 20 worksheets in there, had about 1,000 data points that the contractor needed to complete, and then also had about an extra 5,000 calculated fields. So all the data input totaled up, made all these other calculations and assumptions through there to help estimate what the total cost was going to be. So with all those three things, there came with a couple of challenges. So the challenges was they were short on time. So they had some delays in actually releasing the tender. They wanted to they needed to provide the contractors a little bit more time to bid, but they had a really hard start date, which meant that everything was compressed and they had very little time to actually do the bid. They were really wary of erroneous bids. So some of the executives mining executives had been burnt before with the contractor starting, had won a tender, they'd started, they'd mobilized, and then they'd come back after a couple of months and go, oh, actually, we've just realized there was an error in our bid, which meant that now our bid was actually underquoted and we need to increase our prices and need to increase them significantly. And in that situation, not in an intended environment anymore, they had no way of really negotiating that and really had to cop it. So left a sour taste, and the executives were really wary of making sure they didn't have any errors in the contractors' bids and wanted to make sure they could check them out before they actually went to award. Now, the third challenge was they really wanted to be confident in the decision. So the reason why, there was a number of careers on the line here, and they wanted to be sure there was no errors in the bid analysis. So using humans and combining a lot of this data together, not just looking at what the errors are going to be from the actual contractor, but the number of errors that can creep in actually doing the analysis. And especially when you're building something in Excel to bring all this information together, all you need to do is put the wrong formula or not copy down the right formula, and you'll get an error in there, which can actually swing the decision to a number of different parties, depending on what that error is. So they wanted to make sure that there wasn't any errors from the contractor, but also no errors that actually introduced themselves. So the methodology that we decided to use. So we'd had this proven commercial bid analysis software. So we'd use this software we had this software we designed specifically to analyze and compare Excel pricing sheets in tenders. And the reason why we went for that is that, you know, it's quick to set up, reload, run, and it was actually transparent. So there's no black box. Previously, when people have done other sort of tender analysis, there's all the sort of calculations coming behind the scenes. If you open up someone else's Excel sheets or Excel models, you sometimes go, oh my God, your brain explodes because there's so much there and you will never get through it. But we wanted to make sure it was really transparent so you could easily trace back all the calculations. The second point was we wanted to make sure every pricing component was interrogated because there were so many pricing elements. They wanted to make sure that every single point was actually checked, and doing that by hand, you know, 1,000 data points or 5,000 calculated fields. When you multiply that across 6 different bids, you get quite a few, or 6,000 or 30,000 data points you need to actually review. So we needed to have something that would automatically check all those different points, not just to make sure that the points were, you know, on the data that was put in there was actually, you know, in the ballpark, but also want to make sure that all the data entry things, all those 1,000 feeds, were actually complete. Because I've been through a couple of tenders in my time where a contractor's actually won a tender purely because they've actually missed out a section and no one picked it up, and that actually made the bid significantly cheaper. If there's any contractors on board watching this, yes, these things do happen, and it's unfortunate, but you know, we want to make sure that, you know, everything is actually calculated correctly. The third bit is that we wanted to apply intelligent commercial algorithms into that. And so what that actually means is that we wanted to, if you speak to the CFO, they'll go, okay, well, have you done all these different types of analysis on there? So have you done like a cherry picking analysis on all the bids? Have you done a normalization on the bids? And there's a couple of different analysis that if you were to build that type of analysis every time you went and actually did a tender, it takes a lot of time. You don't quite get it right. So we wanted to use a software that effectively does all that stuff automatically, and all the errors in that analysis has been taken out of. So that's the third bit that we wanted to make sure we wanted to include. So the results. So the good thing was comprehensive analysis was actually completed in less than 2 hours. How we did that was that because when it was out, the responses were out in the market, we could actually build up some analysis or predefined analysis. So when the bid sheets came in or responses came in, we literally loaded the bid sheets up into this tool, ran a few checks, and actually then produced a report which showed us, you know, what all the errors were, what all the opportunities were, and literally took minutes, not days. So that was a massive time saver. Second point was there were hidden errors that were identified. So, you know, a number of contracting pricing data points were identified that in isolation, they looked okay. So it might be, as an example, that, you know, for one specific data point or a rate, the suppliers, you know, A, B, and C. Once supplier A was like $90, supplier B was $95, supplier C was $100. So somewhere between $90 and $100. But then supplier D had it at $150. So initially you might go, that looks all right. But when you run doing some analysis across that, you go, actually, that's out by a significant margin. And so what this software did was actually flag it and say, this is out by a significant margin. So you might want to take a look at that. When it's only out for a little margin, that's okay. And obviously you find those, but you can sort of do a quick sentence check. But however, what we often find in these bids is, we call it the fat finger errors, where someone actually puts an extra zero. So instead of being $100, it's actually $1,000, which significantly skews the whole project. It might not be, you know, by a massive amount, but it might just, you know, tip the scale by a couple of percent, which that might be the only difference between a couple of different bids. And the third bit was, one of the results was there was actually a 10% improvement on the best bid found. So by actually comparing all these bids at a detailed level, we can actually identify some wasteful elements in the scope, which we could then remove and reduce the cost by an extra further 10%, which was obviously fantastic. Over such a big, hundreds of $1 million tender package, this actually made a significant difference. So the details. So that's the overall bit. Now we're getting into a little bit of details of how this actually works. So the Excel pricing sheet or bid sheet. So yes, it was constructed in Excel. So the way it was, and the reasons why this was done was that one, it's easy for contractors to complete and share within their organization. So we looked at some other methodologies. We go, oh, can we actually use some sourcing software or tender package software that are literally, suppliers have to go onto a portal and actually fill in all the information. We found that on these large projects that the contractors, as much as it's easy for them to fill in the information online, there's a whole lot of approvals they need to go through on their side. And if they've got an Excel sheet that they can share within their organization, then it makes it a whole lot easier for them to keep that, and there's no transposing issues or transposing data from their working sheets into to our sheet. Another bit of security we did in there was actually lock the Excel workbook down. And again, this was about limiting the errors. So again, people didn't put in extra rows or change things up, would actually change formulas and everything within the files. And the third bit was that we included a number of totals in there. So all those calculated fields, those 5,000 or so calculated fields that I mentioned, a number of them were in there purely to provide a feedback loop to the contractor so they could do some self-checking. So instead of them just going, well, fill out a rate card and some quantities, and they'd have to work out, well, how much is this going to cost? Well, because I've worked on some tenders before where we get some things in, we're expecting something to be, say, $100 million, and we get a $1 billion response. The issue there is that the contractor, while they're filling things out, they didn't realize what the quantities were or couldn't check the overall totals back to see if they'd made an error on their side. So by putting some of the totals in and summing them up at the front, having like a summary sheet allowed the contractor to really self-diagnose any errors that they found, and when they can do also some rules of thumbs checks that whether their bid is pretty much in the ballpark and it is accurate. So that means, again, reducing the errors before that even comes to us. Okay, so the analysis problem. So we could have just looked at the total costs, but we need to ensure that the cost build up included everything and actually was achievable. So it wasn't just looking at just going, oh, okay, well, who was the cheapest overall? And maybe just let's have a look at the different sections, such as, okay, mobilization cost, demobilization cost, cost per ton, and so forth. We want to actually look into the details to make sure, okay, well, are they providing something that's actually relevant and achievable? So we needed to check things like hourly rates, for the equipment and labor. We also check some of the proposed productivity, so their meters per shift per profile, making sure that they didn't have something outlandish in there. The volume of labor and equipment proposed, did that actually make sense, or was it significantly underquoted? Everyone goes, well, let's find the cheapest one, but finding the cheapest is not always the best because it's underquoted. And I know the old rule of people use by checking, well, who should we go with? And they go, well, let's reduce the highest bid. Let's reduce, get rid of the highest bid, get rid of the lowest bid, and then look in the middle. I think that way is actually a terrible way of doing things, because you're just you're guessing that, assuming that the low bid hasn't bidded properly and the highest bid is way too expensive. But it could actually be the lowest bid's actually done a fantastic job, and the other bids haven't actually done a very good job of bidding. So by going through this way, we'd actually determine, okay, which bid is actually going to be the most achievable and have the best chance of success moving forward. And that even looking at things like the mobilization timeframe. So part of the reason why we went with this software tool, aside from we built it, was that if we didn't go with that, we would have had to probably build something ourselves. So this little chart here sort of tries to explain for what are the different options when doing tender analysis, and especially looking at the commercial side of things. So if we look at the on the x-axis, the number of contractors bids, from low to high, and then on the y-axis, pricing complexity. The pricing complexity might be things like just how many data points are you dealing with. So, for example, if it's a low number of bids and low pricing complexity, so it might be something like just getting a couple of quotes. You can do that sort of analysis by hand. If there's a little bit more detail in the price, like a little more data points, you probably throw into Excel, and that's a suitable tool. However, once you start getting larger number of bids, or the pricing complexity significantly increases, you have to build something up. So either in Excel, start using some code to load all these files in and create grab sheets and all these other things, or you have to build some sort of custom bespoke analysis tool. And there's been some really large tenders done. Typically, when you're talking about a couple of $100 million or a couple of $1 billion, that organizations have spent a lot of money building some tools to actually analyze this. Or you can use it source to contract, things that really that's good for using when it's only low complexity. So yeah, instead we use this tool. It's called Tracy, T-R-A-A or AACI. That stands for Tender Response Automated and Augmented Commercial Intelligence. It's a bit of a mouthful, but let's just call it Tracy, makes it easy. But it's a highly secure web-based commercial analysis tool, specifically designed for analyzing complex pricing bid sheets in Excel. So we worked out that a lot of our clients that we work with have got all these big sort of complicated tenders. Everything's in Excel. So if the responses that we get back are going to be similar, we can load it in. So the good thing about this is you don't need to do any VBA coding required. There's no Excel add-in required for all those things. IT is being locked down everywhere. It's really hard to do both those top two. And the third bit is there's no requirement to spend a lot of time to build an actual Excel analysis tool. So how does this work? So all these bids are uploaded into the online platform. The data is extracted from each of the files that's uploaded. So an Excel file knows how to read Excel files. It extracts all the data, indexes, does all that sort of stuff, but it also encrypts it. So if someone was to try and hack this sort of stuff, all they'd see is gobbledygook. So security is a really big thing that we take really importantly. It's really important to us and our customers, not only from making sure it's just security, but also from reliability from our side. It's if we have a leak, it costs us literally millions of dollars. So we want to make sure that we have the right security in place. And also the analysis can be pre-configured or done in the one spot. So what we've got here in this little illustration here is obviously looking at one supplier, 1, 2, 3. You can load in all the suppliers, but also in the gray Excel thing, there's later as we go through the tender, and if you do through multiple rounds with the suppliers and getting them to provide a best and final offer, or they recut their bid, we can just get them to update that file, send it back, and we can load that in as additional one. We also, if you're looking, this is comparing it from a separate or an existing sort of contract, and you've got a baseline data, so you can complete the same tender document and put information as the baseline and actually use that to compare it against the baseline. So there's a number of different options you can allow for in this. So how is this better? So biggest thing was recutting analysis could be done on the spot. So if you've ever sat in one of those meetings where some information, like the results of analysis have been presented to some senior management, and senior management goes, oh, that looks really interesting. I'd really like to know if you change this and change that. Could you run that analysis? And I don't know, I've sat in a situation before, having done this analysis as a junior analyst, saying, oh, okay, well, we didn't actually set up the analysis to do that sort of thing, but okay, give me a week and I will try and do it. So those using this sort of tool, that's actually gone. So where something would usually take hours or days to do, check and then create a nice graph, this tool actually does this all within seconds. And using that same sort of matrix here, where we've got pricing, complexity, number of responses, you can actually use this tool for the most complicated stuff, but also if you wanted to use it for some simple suitable bids as well, you can do that. So for this specific case study as well, one of the big things was that it's doing all the analysis, and if you've got it on an online system, you go, well, that's great, but we need to actually put it into a report so we can actually then get all the stamps of approvals, needs to go through that delegation of authority levels. Everyone gets the sign off and things. So you need an actual report. So this tool actually exported all the analysis into an Excel document. So it included graphs, created all the graphs, and it's all nicely formatted. So it actually includes things like title page, table of contents, included all these additional or conditional formatting and comments as well in there, so that literally you could just grab this report and attach it to your other when you're doing your qualitative assessment on the contractor's bids as well. So it allowed to be able to go, cool, once we've done all the analysis, put in all the analysis that the stakeholders wanted, we could just wrap it all up into a nice little bow and send it on its merry way. So overall for the case study, they were being short. So being short on time, working with this client, we were able to focus solely on detailed bid comparison by actually eliminating those errors in our own analysis. So all the short amount of time we had, instead of having to spend all this time going, double checking all our work and going, and checking all these different things, we could spend all of our time, 100% of our time, actually looking at the contractor's bids and checking them for errors and also checking them for opportunities. And that's what we did. The end result of that was that it actually reduced both risk and also costs for the mine owner. So that comes to the end of the presentation of the case study. I've got a few other things on here, just saying if you want to know more about that, other things that we're doing at the moment, follow me on LinkedIn, it's there. But I'll circle back to all the attendees now. We've got a few online. If you've got any questions, I'll open up the questions now. So write in the questions, and we can use the next half an hour or so to answer some of the questions, and I can get Neil on board to answer some of those as well. So I'll give you a couple of minutes. Feel free to put the information into the Q&A section there, and we can go from there. Or if you wish, you might even try. All right. Hayden's asked a good question. So how easy is the tool to adapt to different scenarios? It's really easy. Literally, it takes a minute or two to actually, depending on what the information has come through as, and how that information is set up in the Excel file, but literally you can pick and say, choose a number of different cells you actually want to compare in Excel. So you essentially tell it what sheet, what list of, what sort of areas in that Excel sheet you wish to analyze, and then you can choose a different type of analysis you wish to do on it. So literally it's just a drop down. So it takes only a couple of minutes to actually configure that. I've got another question from Anonymous. So how do you compare non-conforming bids? Non-conforming bids. Yeah, this is always a really interesting one. So non-conforming bids, I'll take it in a few different ways. So non-conforming bid, which literally they did not actually submit a bid using the Excel template bidding structure. So in that specific case, what we have to do is you can't use this tool. It's got to do something completely separate. So what we usually do in that case is go, okay, we'll do all the analysis for all the other stuff, then have to take the non-conforming bid and actually go through it by hand and do some simple assessments to see it's worthwhile actually from a high level first, if it's worthwhile progressing. All right, actually, I think Neil said he wants to answer this question live. So I might actually unmute Neil, and Neil can answer some of those questions. Or he unmuted himself.
All right. No, it's all good afternoon, everyone. It's Neil Shackett here. No, Simon, that's just me keeping an eye on and keeping the questions pane clean. So as you start to answer it live, I click on the answer live button, and then when you're finished, I click on the done, and it progresses into the answered file. So no, it's all yours. Back to you, Simon.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Neil. Nicholas asked a question. So I presume that you offer both a service and a software product, as in could we run the software in-house or could we run the analysis? So yes, we do offer that. There is a cost per tender if you want to use the actual software by yourself. It's actually pretty easy to use. Provided a little bit of training, you'll be off and running in no time. And also, yes, we will do the whole end-to-end service for you. What we do find though is by using this process, it actually illustrates the importance of getting the bid sheet corrected actually before it actually goes out. Because if you can get that right, it makes everything else downstream of that work a whole lot easier. And we've actually got another tool that it is an Excel add-in that actually allows you to lock the cells a whole lot faster, allows you to do a whole lot of other things that enables you to create some really nice tender documents. All right, I saw another one. Adam's got a question. Is there a specific example of how the tool insisted in a productivity related issue? I'm not exactly sure. Maybe Adam, you can provide a little bit more details. I think I've got a button here that allows you to talk. So I might do that and see if you wish to say a little bit more about it. All right. Adam, let's see if I can unmute you.
Hey, mate.
Hey, Adam, how you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. How are you?
Good, thanks.
That's good. Yeah, I guess the question was, you know, you use the tool to baseline and compare bids and whatnot, and I was wondering if there was a specific example that the tool sort of highlighted where, you know, it helped assess a productivity issue between the bids or something like that, whether there was something that you could share with us that showed the actual sort of, I guess, use of it or practical use of it.
If I understand your question correctly, so productivity related to the actual, you know, how many, you know, in this specific example, how many meters per shift they're actually going to produce. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, something like that, mate. Yeah.
Yeah. So we use this actual tool to anything that was effectively, you could have a number assigned to it that the contractor is going to provide, be measured against. So you know, obviously for tenders, we look at it often about the actual dollar figures, but also you can look at, in this case, was manning levels, but also you could look at actual productivity as well. So they could say, okay, over these months, so we had an actual time series which say, okay, well, what's your production actually going to be? And over the months, we actually see what their productivity is going to be. And so we could overlay that and actually compare on a month to month, but also on a total project what the difference in their productivity was actually going to be. So you could actually do that same analysis. So the way we did that was that when the bid sheet was set up, we said, okay, in these specific cells, fill in this information here related to your productivity. We then actually, because we got that same information from each of the different contractors, we could actually tell this tool, say, look in this area of your bid sheet and then run this type of analysis over it. So compare variance, compare totals, and a number of other ones.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Not a problem. All right. Cool. Helly, do you want to answer a question or ask your question to the group? I'll allow you to talk on here. Hi, Helly.
Hi, Simon.
How you doing?
I'm fine. Just want to, because I'm quite wondering how the software works all throughout the process.
Yeah.
One that makes me curious is, did you encounter some errors throughout the bidding process of using the software, and did you ever anticipate those errors to transpire during the course of the process? And
Yeah.
In additional, how did you address those ones, just in case if you are already tied to a customer during that sequence or situation?
Yeah, I'll answer the first bit of that question about the errors, because the errors within the bids, you'd think and you'd assume that all these bids go through a number of different checks and everything before they actually get submitted, and they all do. But we're dealing with humans, and when there's a whole lot of complexity in these pricing sheets, sometimes things are missed, or they're glanced over, or people put something in there so they'll come back to it. And so a really great example is that when going through that, on each of the different sections, we could look at it and go, okay, well, for this component here, it might be something like mobilization. So all the costs for mobilization. We typically find that in most tenders that if the contractors are within about a 10% pricing, then something's like they've got it mainly right. If everyone's around about 10% variance out, it's okay. But then if we see a supplier and it's they're half the price or even just a little bit out from that variance, the software will flag that, and that can be something we go, actually, we didn't expect that. We wouldn't have usually picked that up. And so we go, well, actually, their mobilization is a little low. Maybe they're just, that's their cost of mobilization. But it just allows, by flagging, it allows us to then list a number of questions. So when we go back and provide some feedback to the contractor about their bid and go through and ask a number of questions, we could say, okay, so your mobilization, can you just run us through how those costs were actually built up and explain a little bit more about it? And quite often when going through that questioning, they'll then come back and go, actually, no, we have made a mistake here. Or alternatively, they illustrate a different method that actually is significantly cheaper. And that's the reason why it's there. So that's one example of how the errors, like it flags those errors. And another one is that the fat fingers that we sort of talked about before, when it might only be a really small light item and someone's actually put in $10,000 instead of $1,000 or $100. That actually happens more often than you think, and that it can skew the results quite significantly. But so what it does is literally the way the software does it is literally goes through for every single pricing point. It goes for that pricing point, let's compare it to all these other pricing points, and does a sort of match and compare. So let's compare all these pricing points when excluding this and what's the variance there, and then does a number of those different combinations at the same time. And so it can say, okay, well, this one is when you exclude it from these other ones, what's the average, what's the, you do some statistical, what's the standard deviation and so forth, and say this is outside the acceptable sort of standard deviation that we would think for that specific pricing point, or even, you know, the case of manning levels or person levels, I should say, or even the productivity, and we can identify those ones and flag it and go, these seems a little bit odd. It also provides a pretty good indication as well that we've seen some other sort of bids as well that we've gone back, the consulting sort of piece where we've gone and someone's asked us to review a tender and it didn't go so well. And we picked it up and we ran through some analysis of it. We found that the variance in pricing, all the different things, were out by a couple of 100%. And that just identified that the contractors didn't quite understand the scope, or there wasn't enough scope there for them to accurately bid. So using this tool can identify those sort of problems as well. So in terms of whether we anticipated some of these errors or not, yes, some of them we're expecting some fat finger ones, and we're expecting to identify a few of those ones. The good thing about this, and where we, you know, and part of the title page of this was the identifying some of the opportunities, is that where a contractor's provided different price for things, we can go, okay, why have they provided, like, their price is out of the variance of all the other ones, and just by asking a few questions specifically around that, we can go, oh, they're doing this a completely different way that we actually sort of were proposing or requesting, or there was something a little bit different the way they did it, which significantly changed the price point. And by using the old way of just going, well, they're cheaper, so they're the cheapest, so we're just going to exclude them, would actually mean you're missing out on a significant opportunity there. So I hope that answers that question. Was there, sorry, the last bit of that question, Helly, was? Hope that answered it. Maybe not. Oh, well, maybe we'll come back to it. I'll answer one of these other ones. Okay. From Hayden. So, will the prevalence of errors that occur so often in the tender analysis and the time taken, what is your view on why the industry keeps with the old way of doing things? Well, Hayden, you can tell them all about this tool. I don't know, it's just the way it's done, and it's a lot of effort. People just, I don't think people are aware of the amount of errors that actually do occur, both from the bidding and also the analysis side of things. There's been a huge amount of studies being done over time about how, you know, prevalent errors are within actual Excel documents. You know, orders have gone through organizations, even just using Excel documents to run businesses and stuff like that. And the amount of errors are huge. There's been some really big case studies, specifically in the UK, where there's been some errors in some bids, and especially on large government contracts. And it's, you know, caused a significant issue for these, you know, typically construction bids. So I don't know why they keep on doing it. I don't think people know there's a different way. And I think also people don't often go into the next level of detail. They're happy to just go, well, actually, we'll just compare, you know, the total price and maybe one level down at, you know, the sub-level prices, and let's sort of, you know, if they're roughly within about the cost, then okay, we'll go with one of those. And they won't go beyond that, and they think, okay, well, let's just put the risk back onto the supplier or the contractor. So I don't know. I don't know why they keep on doing that, but you know, hopefully illustrating that there's a different way, we'll see some change. Richard, I've got a question from yourself. In calculating the rates, contractors will or may vary a rate depending on where and how they recover their overhead costs, as well as they want to put their risk and margin allocation. It's true. So subsequently, one rate might be high, another rate might be low, but the total cost will be the same. Does this mean that the contractor might be knocked out even though the contract sum is favorable? Absolutely not. They wouldn't get knocked out. It really depends on what's the sort of model you've constructed. If you're looking So this is assuming that there's a bit of variability in how they actually structure their costs. And if that's the case, then you can look at just the costs for the different sections. So yeah, they might have, yeah, it really depends on how you actually set up the bid. And that's why a really important thing is knowing what you're asking for at the very start. Because obviously if you don't know that, you're never going to be able to do the analysis. So even if you didn't have a tool like this, it's going to be really difficult. You don't be able to look at that high level cost. So by knowing what you will analyze, it's almost having like an analysis plan when you're actually developing up the bid. So when creating the bid at the very start, it's going, well, how are we going to actually analyze this and do the analysis? What are the things we're going to check for before we actually release this this bid sheet? So in that specific example, sometimes it's, you know, you do want to allow the contractor some flexibility on their pricing. Then in those cases, then yeah, you might go, okay, well, our analysis plan is just to check some of these totals, and you put a few little subtotals in there. So as you said, the contract sum might be favorable. We'll sort of break that down into the contract sum in different areas. We'll look at those specific things. And then also what we do is quite often build into the bid sheets a few different ratios. So you know, it's much like you do sort of have some commercial ratios about, you know, people per ton or whatever it might be, man hours for maintenance and things like that. Then you could actually look at those ratios and again look at the variance between some of those ratios to see, well, is this going to be right on or not? So I hope that answers that question. I've got another question from Tina on the chat. So if the Excel spreadsheet has contractors provide their tender contract program, does the software graph these for a visual of how they vary? If so, is it by the activity or more detailed? Tender program, how they vary. I'm not exactly sure. Tina, do you want to, I might, I can't see Tina on here to actually give her access to say something. So maybe Tina, if you're still on it, if you want to provide that. The account various qualifications, contracts, markup. So we've got some other questions there from Tina. I'm not sure, Tina, if you're still on there, do you want to just put something in there and I'll see if I can give you access to that. So Tina was asking for some other questions. Yep, you're still here. Fantastic. I'm not seeing you, Tina, as attendees to give you access. Are you sitting with someone else that I can turn on your volume? No, sorry. I am.
Yeah, unfortunately, Tina, we can't see you in the attendees list, so we can't give you, you know, the ability to chat, to unmute your microphone. Simon, my guess is that the question is around timelines or Gantt charts for the operation, and how's it dealt with within the tool.
Yep. Okay. If it's sort of around Gantt charts and timings. So in this specific example, we looked at the manning or the personnel levels across that and when they were looking to actually execute that. So we did ask for sort of a breakdown along that. So we could actually graph that. So the software could look at that and actually graph it. So with all the analysis it's got in there, you can actually ask to do different charts. You can, it does a few different ways to actually visualize that. So if your questions about, well, can we visualize the data rather than just doing some, you know, some analysis and flagging stuff, yes, it does actually visualize that in graphs, so you can do it. Gantt charts, not quite set up for that, but you know, we can always add things like that into it as it's needed. So does that answer your question, Tina? Might way to do that. Could you see, for example, a visual of what contractor A proposes in terms of how many development meters they have scheduled each month versus contractor B? Yes, exactly. So if you ask for that information when you're putting in the bid sheet, if that's really important, then include that. So in this specific example, it's like, yes, they had a development profile. And so, yes, you could actually draft that. And that was one of the specific reports that we pulled out that was in the final document analysis document for this. So you could actually look at saying, well, what were the meters actually provided through that? Then by doing some of the calculated fields as well, we could, in the bid sheet, actually look at doing some other stuff in there, like, okay, well, smoothing out, doing some smoothing of those month to month, which allows to do another level of analysis where you can now start looking at, okay, if we smooth this out, is that really achievable? Is it not? Is it going to go above or below some thresholds in there? So I hope that answers your question, Tina. We've got about 5 minutes left. So if anyone else got any other questions, feel free. I think you can raise your hand as well on here. I'll open it up to say something. So feel free to ask him a questions. All right. Sorry, Tina's got one other question. Did you see my example or contract term conditions, exceptions, and how those dealt with? So yeah, contract terms, so changes to the actual contract document and so forth. This software doesn't deal with that. So typically in a contract, when you're doing analysis for the tenders, so there's like, we say there's two major bits, the quantitative analysis, that's specifically what this tool looks at. And then you've got the qualitative, which is all asking a number of questions about some of their skills and experience and so forth. And a subset of that is about those terms and conditions, and also things about their qualification. So this specifically doesn't deal with it unless you can change some of those questions into something you wish to evaluate numerically. So you might ask for how many people, so about how many people you have, how many people of a certain skill level and stuff like that. We've actually got some numbers around it, and then you can use compare some of that. But in actually changing terms and conditions within inside contracts, no, it doesn't do that. On the qualitative things, we're asking a bunch of questions, being able to analyze those things. We've actually got some other tools that we have built that actually does do that. So of all the questions you ask the contractor, when you get them back, it actually consolidates all those and allows it for very simple marking. But that's a different case study. So I hope that answers your question, Tina. Cool. Is there any other questions before? That's okay to hog the mic, well, the virtual mic, Tina, since we can't give you the actual mic. Cool. All right. If there's, I'll just ask one last time if there's any other questions you have while you're thinking about any other questions. We will put a recording of this this video on LinkedIn so that others can you can refer back to it, you can share it with others and so forth. If there's any other information you or other things you want to know about contract mining, commercial analysis, data analysis on the right models and so forth, then feel free to follow me or Acquire Insights on LinkedIn. It's probably the best place to start. And something to look out for is this publication is in we're working on at the moment. So the future of contract mining, where essentially we're looking at some of the global trends happening in mining and going, well, what's going to be the impact of those on actual contract mining? Things like automation, productivity, ESG, and so forth. And what's the future of, what's the future contract miner actually even look like? So we're having some interesting debates internally about that. But yeah, look out for that one. All right. If there's no more questions, I will finish this up. So thank you very much for attending. Neil, thank you so much for helping with the Q&A. I hope you found this insightful. Our business is called Acquire Insights. So our objective is to provide something insightful to yourself. Any feedback you've got around this webinar, please feel free to contact myself directly. My email address is sthompson@acquireinsights.com.au. Feel free to reach out that way, or pick up the phone and give me a call. You can get through to us via our website and our company name there. So I'll hand that. I'll finish this up right now. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it, and we'll speak to you a little bit later. All right, bye.